you've done a lot of research on this. I've seen it on your website. And I want to, just before you get into it, again, people can go to Eternal Christendom and get lots of those resources on the fathers.
Yeah. No, thank you. We're a nonprofit. So we're putting all this out there for free for people. So we had an article. You had said, which father are we going to cover this week? I said, I think St. Augustine and the True Church.
Good.
So this is article number 29 on becoming Catholic. And it's called The One True Church, St. Augustine, Part 1. And it's from his letter. He wrote a work called Against the Fundamental Letter of Manichaeus. So Manichaeus, or Mani, was a Persian, self-proclaimed prophet, Christian heretic. And so Manichaeism was one of the great heresies that St. Augustine confronted.
Can you define what Manichaeism is for those who don't know?
Yeah, it's got many different aspects. I don't understand every jot and tittle of it, right? Sure. But fundamentally, Manichaeism, the key issue that St. Augustine dealt with was Manichaeism essentially said that there was a good God and an evil God.
Right.
And there's many, many problems with that. But the chief one is that this basically affirms that there is some substance in the universe that is intrinsically evil. Whereas St. Augustine and the church has said, no, because everything comes from God, everything he created, insofar as it exists, is good.
Yeah.
Even Satan himself, his angelic nature, insofar as it exists, it doesn't go beyond that because his will has made, wicked choices. But insofar as it exists, it is good.
Got it. Thank you for that. So
because God doesn't bring anything into existence out of nothing that is evil, he can't do that.
Right.
And so Manichaeism, it's interesting. I think there's a reason why Manichaeism is very similar to a lot of occult and Gnostic sects and whatnot, because they see our God, the true God, as the evil God. And so they have to assert a sort of principle that opposes that's equally, if not more powerful. And so there's a reason why Manichaean tendencies are very prominent among those sorts of groups. So anyway, but I in this particular article, I focused on what he said about the church, because I read this when I was a Protestant.
Wow.
And it was amazing what he said, because he's basically saying to the Manichaeans, this is what the true church is, and you're saying I should leave it, but this is what keeps me in the church. And St. Augustine's description, I would say, continues to apply to only one church to this day. And so if I can read it, and we can go bit by bit here.
Let's do it.
But this is what he says. This is from chapter 4, section 5 of Against the Fundamental Letter of Manichaeus. He says, quote, "For in the Catholic Church, not to speak of the purest wisdom, to the knowledge of which a few spiritual men attain in this life, not to speak of this wisdom which you do not believe to be in the Catholic Church, there are many other things which most justly keep me in her bosom." And then he lays them out. "The consent of peoples and nations keeps me in the church," and we'll unpack these. "So does her authority, inaugurated by miracles, nourished by hope, enlarged by love, established by age. The succession of priests keeps me, beginning from the very seat of the Apostle Peter, to whom the Lord, after his resurrection, gave it in charge to feed his sheep, down to the present episcopate. And so lastly, and this was particularly interesting for me as a Protestant, does the name itself of Catholic, which not without reason amid so many heresies the church has thus retained, so that though all heretics wish to be called Catholics, yet when a stranger asks where the Catholic Church meets, no heretic will venture to point to his own chapel or house."
Wow.
"Such then in number and importance are the precious ties belonging to the Christian name, which keep a believer in the Catholic Church as it is right they should." And then he says, this is the final line from this part, "But with you," meaning the Manichaeans, "where there is none of these things to attract or keep me, the promise of truth is the only thing that comes into play," meaning they're promising that they have the truth, which is just their opinion.
Yeah.
"Now, if the truth is so clearly proved as to leave no possibility of doubt, it must be set before all the things that keep me in the Catholic Church. But if there is only a promise without any fulfillment, no one shall move me from the faith which binds my mind with ties so many and so strong to the Christian religion." So anyway, that's just the first quote. We can cover the next one in the next segment, but I found so many things about these things. So, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, most of it. But he talks about, the consent of peoples and nations. So This is one thing that many of the fathers use to contrast the church with heresy and schism, that the Catholic Church after the apostolic age is everywhere. but every heresy and schism starts in some local place. So it's not like you're seeing Arianism. Eventually, heresies like Arianism spread to different parts of the church, and then it was defeated and gradually rolled back. But Arianism itself started in one particular place, the Church of Alexandria and the priest Arius, right?
Yes.
It wasn't like Arianism was popping up all over the church simultaneously. So that's part of what it means to be Catholic, is that it's this reality that's everywhere in the church all the time in one sense or another. And no heresy and schism does that. So where St. Augustine really pushes this point, for example, is with the heretics, the Donatists, which started as a schism in North Africa. They basically thought, without going into all the details, they basically thought that they were the one true church. There was some sort of episcopal ordination issue, and basically they still had the sacraments, they still had the priesthood, they still had bishops. Sounds a lot like the Eastern Orthodox.
I was just going to say that. Yes.
But St. Augustine pointed out to them that no, the true church is in all nations. For all these reasons, he goes to Old Testament prophecies that speak about the mountain of the Lord filling the whole earth, and he's basically saying to the Donatists, well, that prophecy should be amended to be just North Africa, if you're right, So that's kind of when he refers to the consent of peoples and nations keeps me in the church. That's the sort of universal, global kingdom that he's talking about. And then he says, so does her authority, inaugurated by miracles, nourished by hope, enlarged by love, established by age. So again, he talks about this in other places, like of true religion. This is another treatise of his, but he talks about miracles, the apostles doing miracles at the beginning of the church, and this sort of helping to, authenticate her message and authenticate her divine origin. And so he's saying that this same Catholic Church is that church that the apostles started. So there's a continuity there, right? And he's clear in many of his other writings that this continuity will continue until Christ returns. So many Protestant theories basically amount to saying there never was such a Catholic Church, or that there was, but it kind of all fell apart.
Right.
Or there's some sort of permanent, like the Anglicans have their branch theory that there's a legitimate branch with the Anglicans, there's a legitimate branch with the Eastern Orthodox, and there's a legitimate branch with the Catholics. But you find absolutely nothing like this in St. Augustine or any of the fathers. They believe that the Catholic Church, there would be schisms, there would be heresies, but the Catholic Church would remain whole, united, and entire until the end of time.
If you like the message of Virgin Most Powerful Radio, type in under comments, Jesus is King.